The question is asked, is there anything more beautiful in life than a young boy and a young girl clasping clean hands and a pure heart in the path of marriage? Can there be anything more beautiful than young love? Well, the Torah recounts the adventures of our forefather Jacob as he leaves his own parents' home and he heads out to his uncle Laban in search for a bride. And as the famous story unfolds, Jacob falls in love with Rachel, the younger daughter of Laban, and works 7 years in anticipation of marrying her. As we well know within the famous story and how things unfold, ultimately Laban switches the two girls under the chuppah such that Jacob ends up marrying Leah instead of Rachel. It is then thereafter that he has to work another 7 years in order to be able to marry Rachel as well. But right at the outset, when introducing us to both Rachel and Leah, the Torah says, "And the eyes of Leah were weak, and Rachel was exceptionally beautiful." Juxtaposed to this verse, the Torah immediately adds, "And Jacob loved Rachel more than Leah," which is why he wanted to initially work for her. And it makes us wonder. It's rather disturbing. Are we suggesting here granting legitimacy to the shallow exterior, contrasting one with some not such nice eyes with another who was exceptionally beautiful? And what are we to make of Jacob's character, that he loved Rachel over Leah? Is he so drawn to the mere superficial, to the beauty, such that he loves one over the other? I suggest that here we're being given a profound insight into what is the essence and success of any marriage and relationship. The Medrash famously tells us that the reason why Leah's eyes were so weak was because people would typically say that Rebekah has 2 sons, Esau and Jacob, and Laban, her brother, has 2 daughters, Leah and Rachel, and so the older Esau will marry the older Leah, and the younger Jacob will marry the younger Rachel. Leah herself is deeply perturbed by this suggestion of her having to marry the iniquitous Esau, and this prompts her to continuously cry, which in turn results in her weakened eyes. And this, you might suggest, implies a little bit of selfishness on Leah's part. You see, one of the reasons suggested thereafter for the kidnapping of Leah's daughter many years that follow is because of the fact that ultimately, in the first instance, Leah and subsequently her daughter Dinah should have been marrying Esau. The woman is, after all, the cornerstone of the Jewish home. And it is anticipated that had she indeed married Esau, or later her daughter Dinah would have married Esau, they would have transformed him. They would have made him into a better person. Granted, Leah may have been somewhat perturbed at the outset from the suggestion that she has to marry Esau, such a villain in effect. But to be so self-obsessed to the point of constant tears, without looking at the bigger picture, that maybe ultimately she can marry him, she can change him, she can make him into a better person, suggests a little bit of selfishness on her part. Let's contrast this to Rachel, who demonstrates absolute selflessness. Let's remember how when it came time for her to finally marry her beloved Jacob, knowing and waiting for 7 years for that moment, and recognizing the fact that her father switched them under the chuppah, that she chose to give these special signs that Jacob had handed her in anticipation of Laban's swindle. And she handed those signs over to her sister Leah to be able to spare her any embarrassment. Here, Jacob gave me these signs to give him under the chuppah so he'll know it's me. We're now being switched. You're going to find yourself embarrassed. Take these signs, hand them to him to spare yourself embarrassment. She gave up the love of her life, not knowing if thereafter Jacob would marry her as well, but to spare her sister any sort of embarrassment, demonstrating absolute selflessness in the process. And it gives us pause to consider how, in essence, selflessness is so essential and so integral for the benefit of any relationship. You know, eyes are the windows to the soul. As even the Talmud remarks, one can look into the eyes of a bride and know everything about her. Jacob will have looked at Leah's weak eyes, recognized perhaps some element of selfishness therein, and that's not ideal for marriage. Rachel, on the other hand, the Torah says, was very beautiful. By definition, there was everything about her character that reflected true altruism. And thus, yes, Jacob loved Rachel. there was an immediate attraction where he recognized that she, like he, would be the ideal partners to be the next patriarch and matriarch of Israel, setting up the 12 tribes. Every marriage is a selfless act. Each partner is taking their lives until then entirely their own, as it were, and committing it to another. And still, even in that context, people mistakenly assume that marriage is a give and take relationship. That's a fundamentally flawed approach. Marriage is a give and give relationship, where each spouse should only ever be concerned with what they're putting in, not worrying about what they may be taking, what they may be getting out as well. And when each concentrates on just giving and giving, they will both invariably receive as well, albeit in a totally selfless framework. True love means that you and I are connected at a level and where our emotions are so intertwined that we feel each other's pains and joys. Like the rabbi who famously took his wife with her painful leg to the doctor and said, "Doctor, my wife's leg is hurting us." The 7 marital blessings, which sanctify every Jewish union, follow in sequence. First, we recognize God as creator of everything. Then we offer specific thanks for his having created mankind. We then make reference to the fact that he created man in his image, and then we wish fruitfulness, happiness, and prosperity to the young couple. But in that third blessing, referring to his having created man in his image, we add the words, "and formed from him," that is from man, "the eternal structure." This of course refers to the wife who will bear children, thereby securing future generations. But the words literally translate to mean an everlasting home, which is intrinsically linked with the fact that God created man in his image. In other words, the secret to a binyan ad ayad, an everlasting home, is recognizing the fact that God created man in his image. We introduce that acknowledgement of selflessness, the fact that we're both extensions of God, that we're two halves of a whole, that we are essentially soulmates, and thus each one giving and looking only ever to nurture the other. Is something more beautiful than young love? Yes. It's the spectacle of an older man and an older woman finishing their journey together on that same path. Their hands are bent, but still clasped. Their faces are wrinkled, but still radiant. Their hearts are physically tired, but still strong with love and devotion for one another. There's only one thing more beautiful than young love, and that is old love. And that is achieved when two halves of the soul are selflessly harmonized as personified by Jacob and Rachel. Shabbat Shalom.